Hi, long range hunting. Today we're going to be talking about using Hornady A tips for hunting. Now, I get a lot of requests for information about a lot of different bullets, especially match bullets for hunting. Are they good? Are they bad? One that came on a few years ago was the new Hornady A tip, which is essentially an improved version of the ELD match. And I got a lot of questions about it. I started hunting with it. I tested it. And over the last few years, I've compiled data on it, both my own and some others. And today I'm going to share that with you, give you guys a breakdown on how the Hornady A tip performs and should you use it for hunting. Now let's dive into this bullet. So this is a match style bullet, which works great for hunting. At least the ELD match and some of the other ones do. Certain ones are good, certain ones are bad. Now this is a tipped projectile. Any of you who watch know I love tipped projectiles. They work extremely well. But let's look at the actual construction of this. So this has the same AMP jacket as the ELD match. As I said, it's an improved version of the ELD match. So you can see here it has a nice thin jacket. It is not bonded to the core. It's not a bonded bullet. So you have your jacket, you have your core. It's the same core that's also in the ELD match. The difference is the tip and the shape. So this is slightly more aerodynamic, giving you a higher BC, and it has an aluminum tip. The other thing that they changed is how this is done. So with ELD match, when you're going to get your box of ammo, they're going to make thousands of those bullets and then they're going to box them up. With the A-tips, they changed it to where when you get a box of their bullets, it is one after the other. So every bullet is sequential to the next one. So they'll start with number 1, they'll make number 2, 3, 4, and when you get to the end of that 100, it's all from the same lot, one right after each other. So the consistency is much better. You're not getting mixed. There's, as tools and stuff wear, it can change stuff. So you get a lot better consistency. I do like and dislike the packaging. You can see it's a huge box here, but each individual bullet doesn't touch the other one. It's secured in here. It prevents any damage, dings, anything. And so that's pretty nice, but it takes up a lot of space. Now, bullets like this work in two manners. It has two mechanisms for expansion. So it has two mechanisms of expansion. One is the tip. You can see the shape of the cavity itself. As that bullet impacts, the tip is going to be forced backwards. If you can see the shape of that, it's going to force it outwards on the jacket. And once it hits the core, it's going to start initiating the core to start peeling. So that's your first mechanism, is that tip itself, the shape of the cavity and connecting with the core. And then the second mechanism for expansion is the actual jacket. As that jacket starts to peel out, it starts to grab material, which is going to force it open. So those two mechanisms of expansion is what's going to cause it to expand. Now, that's going to cause at high velocity to expand much faster. So you'll have less penetration before that opens up, which is where you want to watch your maximum impact velocity at. The lower velocities, it's really going to help because it's going to aid you much more in opening up at those lower velocities, because you do have multiple mechanisms of expansion, and due to the size of that cavity, it's going to really be able to open up better. Now, like I said, it works like a wedge, and it's going to wedge back in there. So it really, really works well. The nice part is it doesn't affect the BC. If you took a open tip match or a boat tail hollow point type bullet, in order to get that big of a cavity, in order to open up, even without the tip, if you remove that tip, it's going to have a horrible BC. It's not going to have great ballistics. Having the tip in there keeps the ballistic coefficient high, the aerodynamics, so that is very important. Now, why is BC important? Well, it has to do with your impact velocity. The higher the BC, the less drag, the less wind, so you're going to have less wind effect to deal with. It's not going to be as affected, so you're not going to have to deal with that as much, which is a good thing. The other thing is drag. It's not going to have the same amount of drag, and so your velocities are going to stay higher. So if you take a lower lower BC projectile next to this, and same muzzle velocity at, let's say, 500 yards, guess what? One is going to get there faster, and it's going to have less drop with a higher impact velocity than the other. So the BC is going to help you. And, you know, there's a saying, speed kills. It's true. The faster that projectile is going, the more violently it's going to open up, the more potential energy that's transferred into the animal. So that is very important. I love tip bullets. Now, one thing I will say here that is the difference I've really noticed in the ELD match versus the A tips is the aluminum tip actually gives you slightly more penetration. And I'm going to show you guys that, but generally an inch to an inch and a quarter more before initiating. So that can kind of help when you're talking about, you know, shooting an animal where you have a little more impact resistance or depth of penetration required. It doesn't open up quite as fast. I'm not sure why, but that's just something that happens. I conferred with some guys that were ballistic experts that had to do with a lot of this. They confirmed the same thing, that you're going to get a little bit more penetration with it. So just something to think about, but that can be a good thing on the higher end as far as your maximum when you're doing those closer range shots. But let's dive into all of this. Now we're going to talk about the ballistic gel testing. Now, I did episodes on these, and if you look in the description below, I'll have links to those episodes. That way you can watch the whole thing. I'm not going to show the whole thing here because this video would be really, really long. I'll show you guys some pictures, etc. But I started in gel. Now, there's some misconceptions about ballistics gel. That it doesn't work, it's not, you know, accurate, blah, 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 blah. And the people who are saying that are just guys generally that either they don't know what they're talking about, or they didn't like the results of their favorite bullet, and so they tried to put it down by saying that it's not accurate. Well, it's used by every manufacturer. It's used by, you know, FBI, etc. So something that testing has shown, and even just with this, with me, is if you look at what the ballistics gel does, is it 100% the same? No. But it's very close. Showing it, if you look at the ballistics gel, what it's going to do to the animal or even a person, it's going to be very, very close to that. It's consistent media where you can test and compare. It'll give you a good idea of penetration, energy transfer, etc. So it is accurate. There's a reason, and that's been compared looking at, oh, okay, here's X amount of kills with it. Let's look at the wound channels. Let's look at this. You know, let's look at the ballistic gel. How, you know, far did it penetrate before it opened, all that. So it does work. So if anybody tells you otherwise, they're full of it. But is it 100%? No. There's variables of bones, shot placement, etc. But it does give you a good representation and a good comparison for comparing different bullets or even the same bullet, impact velocities, etc. So starting off, a buddy of mine sent me a 230 grain A-tip out of the 30 cals. I had it out of a 300 Win Mag. So for that test, this was impact velocity of 2,501 feet per second. And you can see that it caused a massive amount of trauma. Large wound cavity, did a lot of damage. Nice permanent wound cavity there. I believe it was 2 to 2.5 inches at the widest part of the permanent wound cavity. So a lot of transfer. The bullet held together. A lot of people don't realize that, yes, those bullets, even though it's not bonded, will hold together. And even if it separates, that's a misconception that if it separates, it's a failure. That jacket really doesn't do anything. It's the core that really does. And if you find the core and look at it, you'll see that that core is still expanding and moving through. The jacket's just like wearing a coat. If you take, you know, your coat off, you still have your body. So Simply having the jacket separate, it's not a big deal, to be honest. But this time it did hold together. I've had both where sometimes it's still on there, sometimes it's not. But every time it's mushroomed. So you can see it worked really, really well. With the 6mm out of my 6 Creedmoor running a 110 A-tip, you can see nice energy transfer there. I even did it with a shoulder bone. It blew right through it, no problem. You know, good amount of trauma for the size. And something, if you compare a lot of ballistics gel, you'll see a lot of guys ask about specific projectiles. So, oh, well, I want a 6.5 with X amount of weight, you know, like the 135. Well, here's the thing. If you look at the 230 and the 110, even though one's a 6mm, one's a 30, it's the same wounding. The difference is the scale of the wounding. So with the larger diameter bullets, it's going, and heavier, it's just going to be larger. So it's kind of like shrinking and expanding a image. It's going to be the same type of wounding, just the amount of size of wounding is going to change. So you don't need to see that specific one done. You can look at one other test from, you know, a 30 cal, and even between this, and you can look in between and go, okay, you know, this is what a 7mm would do. So it's still going to show you the type of performance that you're going to get. So ultimately, they did really well in gel, a lot of energy transfer. Didn't really have a chance to really stretch them out at longer ranges on that, but I did get to go hunting with them and do that. I started out hunting with them with a 6mm, and we're going to dive into that next. Okay, now let's talk about the hunting. I've been hunting with these for a few years. I've done everything with the 6mm from rock chucks up to elk, and we're going to dive into that. I've also got a couple buddies on their data that they sent to me on this and some pictures, so we'll show you that as well. We're going to be looking at a total of 12 animals. We will be looking at 7 deer, 3 elk, an antelope, and a rock chuck. So let's dive into that. Now, the first ones I killed with this was in Oklahoma. One was 513 yards. It's a doe. One is a buck at 516 yards. So with this doe, it was 513 yards. I shot it high shoulder, dropped on the spot, did a massive amount of trauma, as you can see. You can look at it. It caused a bunch of damage in there. The upper portion of the chest cavity was just mush. It turned into puree. It never moved, never twitched. You know, it just dropped right on the spot and was dead. So really, really good performance there. Again, you can go watch the video on that and see a lot more. Then we dive into later that hunt. I ended up getting a buck. It was at 516 yards. It was quartering towards me. I ended up putting the reticle right here. It hit right in between the leg and the neck, and ended up going back and exited about right here by the last rib. So bullet stayed intact for the entire thing. Massive amount of trauma. It ran off, I think it was about 15 yards if I remember right. It just kind of ran around and dropped right out of sight. So, you know, it was a very easy recovery. I mean, it didn't take long at all to even find it. It was dark by the time we got down there, but it was a very quick recovery, got it back. You know, didn't have a lot of documenting on that just because it was dark and trying to get everything done, and I already done another deer. But, you know, those two animals worked phenomenally for that. Now, the next hunt I went on was for elk with this. I went up to Wyoming for a hunt. You know, hunted hard, really just bad conditions for hunting, super hot, nothing was moving. You know, we had an area where we could not hunt, you could not retrieve. That's where all the elk were. It's where they winter. And so we were on the last day. A little 4x4 came running in. It jumped back over the fence onto our side where we could publicly hunt it. And I ended up getting a shot at 494 yards. So I got set up, shot, double lunged it. Massive amount of trauma. I'm going to have you watch the video on this. So you can see there is a great amount of blood there. Most of the time when you shoot and a bullet exits, you'll get maybe sometimes a little something blown out of the exit hole. This had enough to where it looked like we had an oil slick there on the water at this little watering hole. It was about 3 feet. It went about 30 feet, you know, massive pools of blood, very easy to, you know, see. A blind person could have tracked it. So massive amounts. Now, it was within 50 yards of that fence to where if it got on the other side, we wouldn't be able to retrieve it even though it was shot on the correct side. So it ran about 30 feet, stopped. You know, it was doing its thing. I knew it was going to go down. It was dead on its feet, but I had another opportunity to shot, and I did not want to risk it. So, you know, I did a CNS shot, dropped it, you know, lights out, good to go. So you can see here the chest cavity is just full of blood. We got plenty of mush. We have a nice large exit hole, and that's from the first one. The second one I actually recovered on the offside shoulder. So here's the actual bullet from it. You can see that it is intact. It mushroomed great. It did go through a lot more than the other bullet as far as impact resistance. It went through, vertebrae and all of that, ended up in the shoulder. So it had a lot more impact resistance, and it still held together at almost 500 yards. That was at 2,441 feet per second, and it had an estimated 1,455 foot-pounds of energy. Now, the first shot was at 5, the second shot was 494. I just go by 494 just because that's the second shot where it dropped. Was it already dead? Yes. But I just go by that. So it performed extremely well. That got a lot of people butthurt because I had so many people tell me you can't kill an elk at long range, or even, you know, close up with a 6mm, which is ridiculous. And obviously, it proved otherwise. Just for a comparison, I used to hunt with a 338 Win Mag when I was younger. I shot an elk, and it was about 200 yards using that 338 Win Mag, 250 grain. I think it was a partition, if I remember right. And I hit that thing, and this 6mm bullet caused more terminal trauma and a larger exit hole than the 338 Win Mag did. So, you know, again, it's not the cartridge that dictates performance, it's the bullet. And a good bullet from a smaller cartridge will outperform a large one with an okay or a crappy bullet. Not saying anything against partitions, I used them for a long time, but this is a better projectile. These match bullets will open up and really cause a lot of trauma. And so you can see that one bullet went completely through, we had no problem with that. The other projectile went through a whole lot of impact resistance, hitting vertebrae, stuff like that, stopped on the offside shoulder, you know, and was still intact. So, massive amount of trauma in that. Great ballistics, very quick to go down, and I was very happy with it. Now, the next hunt was back in Oklahoma, and that was last year. So we went, and I started hunting. My son was down with me. My brother was hunting another part of the property, and ultimately we all ended up coming together. First day was me. I ended up shooting 2 deer at 530 yards with it, and the impact velocity on that was 2,209 feet per second with an estimated 1,192 foot-pounds of energy. Now, the first one ended up dropping like a rock. Really nice shot, you know, dead right on the spot. The second one ended up jumping up in the air, turning around, and went maybe 30 yards, you know, not very far, and dropped. So it was really quick. You know, I'd gotten my maximum dose. So, you know, I talked to my brother. He was hunting another part of the property, hadn't seen anything. I still had does piling in. So he came up and got on my rifle and shot 2 does, both at 530 along the same trail as they were moving. So the first one he shot was pretty funny, actually, because he shot it, and he's got a ground blind down there where he hunts archery. And so he ended up shooting it. It did a big circle and ended up dying at the door of his ground blind. Like, if it had gone another couple feet, it would have been inside his ground blind. So it's pretty funny that it was a very short, it was probably 30-something yards from where it started, and the way it ran, it might have covered 50 yards maximum. But, you know, it was a very quick, just ran, you know, went down, great blood, you know, was really good. The second one, he anchored it dead on the spot. We got all those, collected them. Now, you know, all those shots, you can see from these hearts and stuff, the lungs were obliterated. I mean, it turned them to, you know, puree. The upper portion of those chest cavities were just destroyed. The hearts, you can see the top part of it is just, You know, it looks like something took a bite out of it. I mean, it just ripped them apart. So the energy transfer, if it had been larger from something like a 30 cal, that whole chest cavity would have been soup. You know, it is a 6mm bullet, or if it had been a higher impact velocity, that energy transfer would have been larger, but it caused a tremendous amount of damage. All of them went down very fast. So it was really great performance. And then the next day we jumped on with my son, and my son, unfortunately, we had a problem with the camera. We had some malfunction, so we didn't get on any footage of it, but he shot his doe at 285 yards. Impact velocity was 2,595 feet per second, and it had an estimated 1,644 foot-pounds of energy. So something I want to point out, a lot of people think that match bullets blow up because they'll find little pieces. Well, how these bullets work is they actually shed. So that bullet's going to open up, and at its widest point, those edges are going to break off on that mushroom. And what that allows is it to get maximum size. Well, if it reaches maximum size and has that contact and it stays that side, it's going to slow down very rapidly. So yeah, you're going to have a massive amount of energy transfer, but you're not going to get the penetration. And so what happens is it opens up, and as it gets to that point, it's going to shed, and it's going to go down in diameter, and it's going to keep doing this. So it allows it to keep maximum diameter while still penetrating, so you're getting the maximum amount of trauma possible. And so people will find little pieces and they go, oh, it blew up. There's all this stuff in the chest cavity, it's obliterated, the bullet blew up. That's not how it works. I've seen plenty of those, I've had plenty of them, and you'll either, one of two things, the bullet exited, or you're going to find that bullet and it's still going to be intact and mushroomed. So it will not blow up. And people say, oh, well, if you hit a bone, it's going to be a problem. Well, the elk didn't have a problem, and I had pretty big bones on that. But on this one specifically, so we had a little bit higher impact velocity, closer range, 285 yards, and he shot it, and he hit it through the middle of the leg, on the thickest part of the leg bone. And there's a misconception, too, that legs are just solid. They're not. If you look here, they're actually hollow. So you have an outer shell, and then you have the inside. So they are not, people think for some reason that they are just like armored, you know, bones that are completely thick. That's not how it works. But you can see here that it got obliterated. And this is actually the exit side. So it hit this side, went through, hit a rib, obliterated the chest cavity. You know, same thing with the heart. You know, the top of that heart's gone. It exited hitting a rib, then hit this leg through the thickest part of the leg and exited. So it passed completely through at 285 yards, and it hit every bone it possibly could going through, and on the thickest part of the bones. And you can see that it just absolutely obliterated. It's too bad we didn't get this on camera because it was pretty epic. It only went about 8 feet. But it happened so fast that we didn't actually get, I was trying to help him. By the time we got him back on target, we couldn't see it. It would have been great to have on film, but it actually snow plowed. Both legs went out, it face planted, pumped its legs a couple times, went about 8 feet and keeled over. And so, you know, it was dead. It was only 8 feet it went. And again, it shows that this bullet, and I mean, the one that butchered it, I know there was no bullet left in there. That bullet mushroomed, caused massive amount of trauma, blew through as many bones as possible going through that shot in the middle of the body, and had no problem doing it. And I was at almost 2,600 feet per second. So to think that match bullets can't hit a bone or they're just going to blow up and not penetrate it's ridiculous. You know, somebody's telling you that, they're full of it. Either that or they are way above the maximum impact velocity. But this shows, you know, we have that's 7 deer, an elk, and we haven't even got to the other ones. Now, I do want to touch on this one because this was pretty fun. I just had this. It was a rock chunk hunt. I hit this at 163 yards. And unfortunately, Logan was filming next to me. He wasn't used to filming with a guy with a muzzle brake. And so he was right in the path of that brake when he was filming. He was off to the side. And so it shook the camera off when I shot. So you can see the rock chuck here, and then you can see this kind of freeze frame. You can see it's blown up, but that thing got demolished. Impact velocity on that was 2,831 feet per second with an estimated 1,957 foot-pounds of energy. And so if you look at it, it literally from butt to head literally opened it up like there was a zipper, like it got unzipped. I mean, the bullet went in and basically blew everything out. And I mean, no joke, from its tail all the way to its head was split completely open, like you had a zipper and you just opened it up. Now again, that bullet, that's a very small amount of depth of penetration and impact resistance. Animals like that, it's very small. So you're not going to even get as much as you would on a larger animal. So you're not even getting maximum, you know, opening up on that. And you can see it split it wide open and had no problem. So can you use these for varmints? And I did ballistic gel with that too. Here's a rabbit that I did. And you can see that it caused, I mean, it turned it into a blob that the Ghostbusters would try to get. You know, it completely distorted the entire gel rabbit. And then you see what it did here. So, I mean, you can see it did the same thing. It turned both of them into a balloon, basically, and caused massive amount of trauma. So, you know, 163 yards. We've done everything from woodchucks clear up to elk, and it's worked great. Now, this is an antelope at 890 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 153 grain A-tip. You can see it runs off, you know, nice lung shot. You can see here that underneath that animal is a ton of blood. Nice big exit hole, caused a lot of trauma. It made it just outside of a camera frame. So, you know, even at that distance, it did extremely well. Because a lot of people ask, you know, I've only gone out to 530 with them so far. But here we are with a 6.5 out to 890. And we're going to go even further than that. So this next elk was another buddy. This was at 350 yards. He ended up shooting it twice. First round double lunged it, you know, typical double lung. It's going to kind of sit there and go, what the heck. He quickly racked another round and shot it, and it dropped on the spot. Same kind of trauma, just massive amounts, you know, lungs obliterated, etc. Did he have to shoot it again? No. But, you know, general rule of thumb with elk is, you know, if you have another shot, bullets are cheap. So, you know, send that round. So he ended up doing that, but great trauma. It was 350 yards. I'm not for sure what the impact velocity was on that, but it obviously did its job really well. I mean, the damage was there from both bullets, you know, catastrophic. It would have never survived the first shot, but he had another shot, so he put it down. Now, finally, we're going to be talking about my buddy's elk, and he got this elk at 1,121 yards. Yes, 1,121 yards. He got it with a 6.5 PRC shooting a 153 grain A-tip. That's the same projectile that the other guy shot a elk with at 350 yards, but this one is over 1,100 yards. Now, his impact velocity was the lowest so far at 1,700 feet per second. Impact velocity. He was up at a really high altitude, so that thinner air, you don't have as much drop. Much faster flight times. So it was a very short flight time compared to, you know, where he's normally at in Oklahoma. So we had 1,700 feet per second with an estimated 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. Now, I know there's going to be people screaming, oh my God, for an elk you need 1,500 or whatever foot-pounds energy. That's bogus. Even Fish and Game is going away from those numbers because the truth is those numbers are bogus. That energy number you see in your ballistic calculator is an estimate. That is the maximum potential that you can achieve. However, that depends upon the bullet. So it's comical to me. A lot of guys will say, oh, you need 1,500 foot-pounds. Well, if you actually look at their bullet and figure out exactly what they're getting, most of them are killing with way under, with the type of bullets they're using, these really, you know, thick jacketed, bonded bullets. They're not getting as much energy transfer, and they're killing significantly under what they believe. And so they're killing under that threshold of 1,500 that they need. They just don't realize it because they think that number on the box is accurate. No, that's only the potential in different bullets, and that's why we use ballistics gel to show the difference between. A perfect example is I did a test at 200 yards one with a Barnes triple shock and one with an ELD match. Now, they had the same impact velocity, but the energy transfer was way different. The potential for the energy transfer was 2,300 foot-pounds of energy at 200 yards. The ELD match, got that. It opened up massively, caused massive trauma, launched the gel block. However, at the same impact velocity, the Barnes caused a significantly smaller permanent wound cavity and only achieved around 700 foot-pounds of energy. Now, they both, according to the ballistic calculator, had the 2,300 foot-pounds. But what it actually achieved was significantly less. And so a lot of these guys are killing elk way under what they think they actually are. So forget about those numbers. I don't even honestly worry about energy numbers. I just worry about impact velocity. Because the truth is, if you're using good bullets and you're sticking to the minimum impact velocity or up, you're going to have more than enough energy transfer to put that animal down. So I don't worry about that. As long as you're within that bullet's threshold, you're going to be good. But yeah, he smoked this thing. It was his second bull ever. So, that was great. But we have 12 animals now that we've examined. You can see that the A-tips performed pretty well. And let's go now to the summary and see what my final thoughts are. Summary, honestly, they're a great bullet. They really are. You can see from the accuracy, the type of groups that I've been shooting. I actually set a personal best. This was at 650 yards. And to think, yes, that's a very, very tight group. 3 shots all on camera. But here is the target next to it. I went to the target next to us, and this is my other group. So both were very small groups on very small targets. The head is, about this big. So I'm doing headshots on that. I did a personal best on that. We're shooting one hole with, the groups in that 6mm. Everybody know that shooting the A-tips has had really good accuracy. They're very consistent. So the external ballistics are great on it. You have the higher BC, less wind, etc. The downside is the cost. As great as they have been, and as much as my 6mm loves them, the cost I still think is overpriced. So that's the one downside. Is it really that much better as far as cost? Because, the ELD match, you pay about $40 a box right now. Maybe you can get it a little under that, but generally you're looking $40 a box. With, these for, depending on it, you're looking 70 to 110 bucks roughly, depending on which one you're looking for. So there's a big gap there on, they're basically the same projectile almost, but these are a little bit more consistent. They don't touch, they're sequential, and they have a higher BC. So it's one of those things. This gun absolutely loves. That's that gun's favorite bullet. Now, the ELD match shot really well in it, but not as good as these, which is why I stuck to these, and I'm going to continue to stick to them. So it's just one of those things. That's what shoots best, so that's what I'm going to do. I don't mind paying the extra, but, ELD match, honestly, if you're looking to practice more, shoot more, the ELD match is going to do the same type of terminal performance. You'll just have a little bit less of a BC. So it's kind of one of those things, you just got to balance it. Money's a factor, ELD match. I mean, you can get almost twice as many bullets for half the cost. So it's one of those things, but terminally it performed really well. Just like I expected it to. We do have that little bit more penetration than the ELD match with the polymer tip, but from ballistics gel, whether it's the rabbit and then looking at the rock chuck to the full-size ballistics gel, doing, deer size with, and all that. So we look at that with the full blocks, the trauma, the permanent wound cavity, everything, and then taking it over to those animals. We're seeing the same type of performance. Great trauma, very fast deaths. I mean, they're going down super quick. Even when it's a non-CNS shot, we've seen drops. and just, again, it obliterates that chest cavity. We've had a lot of good results with them. I'm going to continue. I'll be hunting elk again this year with them, so I'm really looking forward. I'm hoping I can get a little bit further shot. Again, we don't control the animals. They're going to show up where they show up, and as long as it's within my threshold and I can get a good shot off, I'll take it. But again, it just depends. If one walks out at 100, I'm going to smoke it at 100. We'll get some data on the close end with the bigger animals. So it really just depends. But overall, they're a great bullet. If you want to use them for hunting, go ahead. You'll get great results, especially from the accuracy. You know, I always tell people, you know, it doesn't matter what you use. A round in the right spot is better than another one that's not. You know, I tell guys all the time, because they try to preach magnums that a smaller cartridge can't do, which is ridiculous. A smaller cartridge with a great bullet right through the kiss, you know, right through the vitals, is going to be more effective than a magnum through the guts. You know what I mean? It's easier to shoot when they're lower recoil, but that's a whole different topic. But as far as the A-tips, they work extremely well. For external ballistics, they're phenomenal. For consistency, they're phenomenal. They're very easy to get to shoot. I've never had a bad group with them. It's just a matter of I've had a little bit wider, and then I've, you know, narrowed it down from there. But external ballistics is great. Terminal ballistics is great. So, you know, if you want to hunt with them, go for it. They are going to be a little bit better on the higher impact velocities, because that aluminum tip gives you a little bit of a delay in opening up versus the polymer. So that is something to factor in. And on the reverse side, on the lower impact velocities, the ELD match is going to open up a little bit better as far as those lower impact velocities than this. So, you know, you got to balance that as far as that goes. But they're great bullets. They really are. Overpriced, yes, but they're still great bullets. Whether you want to do especially if you do competition and you want to use that to train for hunting, use them for competition, take them to the field. It's a do-all kind of bullet. And, you know, I've been impressed. You know, spent a few years testing these bullets and hunting with them, etc. I'm going to continue to do so, especially in this gun, as long as it shoots them that well. So I hope you guys found this helpful and educational. If you guys have any questions, drop in the comments below. Once again, those links to those other videos is in the description below. Everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting!